Hey, welcome to Technically Working. We're going to give you a special episode this week, and you'll get 174 next week. There's a little glitch in the recording process that happened, um, but that'll be resolved. And essentially, it's just that Damashe's a dummy. So, we're going to have to save some questions for 174 so you can find out what happened. I was at ACB, Michael was at ACB in St. Louis. Did we meet? You have to wait till next week. Did we find barbecue if we did meet? You have to wait for next week for that too. But we did record a show. Now, we didn't have to meet in person to record a show, so, because we haven't met in all these years. But we did get a show recorded. Um, I recorded that on a Zoom H6 studio. And then I stupidly turned around the next day and put that recorder in a box along with some other stuff that I was shipping back to my house. Well, that shipment was delayed and didn't arrive in time enough for the audio to be edited because I wasn't smart enough to copy the files onto the laptop before doing that. I really wasn't thinking. So, what we're going to do for you this week is just give you a special episode. And what this is actually going to be is I'm going to drop into the feed right after this the first episode of Our Perspective with Michael Babcock and Kobe Garrison. I hope I got Kobe's last name right. Anyway, I want you folks to check that show out. I think you should go subscribe. It seems like it's going to be a very good show. They do monthly episodes. So we've heard the trailer before when Mike first announced, against my wise advice not to try to launch a new podcast right away, that he did it anyway. Uh, so we've heard the intro played into this show before. What we're going to do today is I'm going to give you guys the first episode so that we do have something released on this Monday, and we're just going to release that as a special. Everybody will get it. And next week, make sure you tune in for episode 174. Thanks to everybody as always for listening, and shout out to Tip Jar subscribers. We appreciate you.
This is Our Perspective. I liked that intro that we did, Colby. Hey, I am Michael, and I'm joined by Colby, and we're going to kick this thing off, right?
We are. This is our first episode, and you get it in all of its unfiltered glory.
I don't know about that unfilteredness part. We got to have a little bit of filter.
Okay, glory.
There you go. So, my name is Michael Babcock. I live in Oregon, and on the Oregon coast, I am involved with membership. We'll leave it at that. And I am here as a completely blind individual to share with you my perspective on different things that we do within life. Who are you?
I am Colby, and I am in North Carolina and work in the accessibility space professionally. And I'm so excited to be doing this venture with Michael.
So, Colby, why did we start this?
There are so many phrases and words that just popped into my head when you asked that question. We started, I think that the nexus, I don't know if that's even the right word, genesis of this idea maybe came from the two of us being at a conference together and just being around each other pretty much 24/7, navigating that experience physically and metaphorically, I think I'll say, and really just seeing how two totally blind individuals approached being at a conference together and navigating the physical space, the digital space, the metaphorical experience.
The same challenges, and sometimes we handle them the same way. Other times we're like, wait, why did you do that? But no judgment based on
no judgment. Or wait, I don't understand what just happened. Oh, and it really was. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed, seeing things from your perspective, for lack of a better metaphor because it's a Monday and my brain is fried. Uh, and, really just learning from and with each other,
Mm.
I think is what I took away kind of from that experience. And I think a lot of times everyone, just in general, there's so much judgment, um, that we are afraid to be vulnerable or
Mhm.
afraid to ask for help or afraid to admit, we don't know how to do XYZ or approach, you know, this topic or that topic, or ask, for help or ask a question that we might have. And I always appreciate it when I am in a space where, there is no judgment and I have that freedom to be vulnerable or to admit, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can you enlighten me? Or can we explore this further? Or can we, dissect this further?
So I think we thought with this that we would ask each other questions and respond to it and see how those goes. And the format's going to change based on feedback and
Yeah.
how we both feel after we record some content. So we have done very limited content together, and this is going to turn into a long-term thing. But I think we should just jump right into some questions. And I have a question that came to mind Saturday night, and I'm like, I cannot forget that. So I opened the Drafts app on my phone, and I did exactly what I told you to do, and I wrote that question
Write
down.
it down.
so
Write it down.
so the first question for our perspective is, how do you handle loud environments that you need to be present in? And I'm thinking specifically, and you can remember this as well, of the time when I said, yeah, sure, I want, what was that, ceviche? Is that how you say it?
I think it's ceviche.
Ceviche. There you go. I said, yeah, sure, I want some of that. And then I turned to you and I said, what did I just say I wanted?
And yes, and I told you what it was, and yeah, it was not something that you would have chosen.
No, I tried it though. I did try it because I got it. But for me, that's a really challenging time though, especially when you actually have to be present and engage with individuals when you're in a place where there's either loud music or so many people that the volume is ridiculous and you can't hear yourself think. And that's difficult. And I think one of the most challenging parts for me is the orientation.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna say that when I cannot, like when it is too loud and I am not able to orient, or have any sort of audio cues as to where I am or what's going on or my surroundings, that I find to be very overwhelming. I've learned to deal with it somewhat, but I still think that sometimes it is definitely a struggle for me depending on the environment.
Do you have any tips for managing it? Because I think my biggest tip is to go with someone else.
Definitely going with someone else. Also, if you have to be by yourself, or even if you are with someone else, um, it sounds cliche, but remember to breathe.
Mm.
Um, and also remember, and this is really hard for me sometimes, but remember to give yourself grace. And also give others, anyone, the other people around you grace, or the people that you're interacting with,
Mhm.
grace, and really just also remembering to take some time, like as you can and as you're able, to decompress or recharge, even if that's, you go back to your room or a friend's room or go to a space that's, more quiet,
Yeah.
or, where you can really just take that deep breath and let your guard down, for even if it's only 10 minutes, I found that sometimes having that just time to go, okay, I don't have to think right now or pay attention to, 10 million different things right now. Let me take that time to just stop, and decompress or de-stress or, whatever it might be. And, if I mean, if that's putting on music,
Right.
for you, if it is, um, you know, going to bed that extra, 10 or 20 minutes early, just so
Yeah.
you sort of have that, time where, you can give yourself that permission, I'll say, to, just, okay, that was really overwhelming. I need to just take a second.
And allow yourself to do that. And we go, but
Yes.
we will often say no judgment. And I think it can't be emphasized as much. And that's why that's the tagline of the show is even if you have to go take some time, don't let anyone else say, oh, you need to keep up with us because you know yourself the best. So if you are overwhelmed and you can get out of that situation and maybe you come back later, maybe it's
Right.
take a little break or something. We were recently at the same place where we kind of came up with the idea for this show at a dinner, and I found it difficult to converse with the individuals around us because it
Yes.
was a great experience, and I loved hanging out with the people that we were with. But it was loud in that restaurant, and that can be
What?
difficult too. And I think it's been said a few times that sighted individuals can rely on reading lips, even if they don't consciously do that. And I think that's a huge disadvantage that someone who has no sight at all it can't rely on. And I had to ask what a couple of times to the person who was sitting to my right.
And I mean, like directly, I mean, it was. And I think sometimes, um, it, like, to me, it may not look like you're really far away, but it feels like just this spacing, in, where whatever environment you find yourself in. This I'm like, I feel really far away, even from the person that should be, in theory, is very close to me on my left or on my right.
Yeah.
And then, forget it if you're across the table.
Right. Across the table, down two people. And then you're
Yeah,
like, oh,
down,
I'm
yep,
not conversing with that person.
yeah, or well, like I thought I was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, do you have a question for me?
I do.
Oh,
I think I came up with this question over the weekend as well, and like you said, I immediately went to the drafts app on my phone and
I
I wrote
love
it
drafts.
down. Yes, it's one of my favorite apps. Uh, there's maybe another episode for us at some point. But what is something that you that you used to be afraid of, and it could either be, an experience or a concept, but that experience has now taught you, maybe you still get tripped up by it occasionally, but it's not as daunting anymore.
I think for me, one of those things would be the dark. And that sounds really interesting because I had light perception when I was younger. I lost my light perception slowly between 13 and 16. And I like to tell people that when my friends were getting their licenses, I was figuring out what black was. And
Mm.
that was a tough time. And looking back at it, I realized why I had a lot of depression between those ages because I didn't know what was going on and why things were changing for me as much as they were. But
Right.
prior to that experience, when I was a kid, I was terrified of the dark. And I didn't realize why that was. And I think it comes down to it was uncertainty for me. Even though I
Mm.
had some light perception, when there was no light anymore, I was like, huh, what's going on? Where is everything? And how do I orientate myself? And I think that is probably one thing for me. What about you?
You just reminded me of a story, completely related to that, that I'm sure I will tell at some point, or I can tell it, in this same episode. But, um, for me, it and this still causes me some anxiety depending on the situation, but, getting lost. Growing up, I never truly loved orientation and mobility lessons. Um, and I had a very hard time with O&M instructors putting too much emphasis on asking for help. So like asking for help was forbidden for me in when it came to O&M. And that is something that stuck with me into adulthood, frankly, and is something I have, worked very hard on to change, that mindset. But I getting lost, just if I didn't know where I was, or if I didn't know how to get to where I wanted to go, or any of those types of scenarios, um, or if I, like wanted to ask for help but wouldn't, just because of sort of all of that, kind of going on in your brain psychologically, and emotionally, was very tough for me growing up. And it's kind of like you said earlier, I look back now and I think, oh my gosh, that was a lot of a lot of pressure, on my, 5-year-old self, and on up, and through end of high school, really. And then I had a wonderful O&M instructor in college, and she had to do a lot of, Colby, you're fine. You can do this. You are competent. And asking for help is okay. And it's something I still struggle with sometimes. To this day. And I think a lot of times in just when you have no sight at all, and this is it's another one of the concepts I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, because I know you and I have talked about it quite extensively, but everyone's version of independence is different and should not be questioned. And I think that being able to use all the tools in your toolbox, is something that I always heard people talk about. And it took a lot of just, experience, from a personal perspective and a professional perspective, frankly, for that to become, um, concrete, I think, for me, or, very real for me. Also, just, you know, really utilizing all those tools in your toolbox, and knowing that, those tools can remain the same, and tried and true approaches, will stick with you over time. But some of those tools might change. And, what worked for you at one point in your life no longer does. And that's okay. Change and, um, re reimagining, or rediscovering what works and doesn't work for you, it doesn't always have to be the same.
I think it's interesting that you brought up asking for help, and I struggle with that honestly today. I find it is very interesting how I will often go walk around our local neighborhood and not not be as confident as I am when I fly across the country to go travel somewhere else. And I think one of those hesitations for me is asking someone in our local neighborhood, hey, can you help me find this? Or, hey, where is that? Because I feel like though they probably are not judging, they might be. And I'm going to encounter that person. Whereas if I'm in St. Louis, for example, I'm probably not going to see that person again.
Again. Yeah. I'm that I don't find that to be surprising. And again, no judgment.
It'll come back up again, we promise.
Yeah. You'll hear that phrase a lot. I think no judgment was kind of what really, because both of us said it so often to each other throughout that experience that it just, we laugh about it, but it really is also true. I think by the end of it, we both were like, oh, wow, he's not going to judge me. She's not going to judge me.
Yep. So I guess in the last probably 5 or so minutes, I'm in full transparency because I'm all about transparency. We did absolutely no preparation.
No,
we did not script any of this, so bear with us while we've tried to figure this out. But I'm curious. For me, I want to get out of this podcast. I'm going to ask you when I answer this what it is, and then we'll wrap it up. But what it is you want to get out of doing this podcast. And for me, I want an opportunity to share my life stories, to share some of the challenges I went through as a younger individual, some of the amazing experiences that I had as a younger individual. And I feel weird using this word, but I'm going to anyways inspire others to actually try to do something that maybe you might not have tried in the past. I am the oldest of now there are 4 of us living, but I'm the oldest of 7. And oh wow. That's interesting to think about. Now there are actually Andrew, Ben, Evan, and Amanda. Yeah, 5 of us living, and it was 7. And I am the only blind person in my entire family, and I was treated like my sighted siblings. I like to tell people my younger sister, she was born 2 years younger, or 2 years after me, and she would mess with me all the time. So mom would send me to go get her, and I'd go running down the road and say, Amanda, Amanda. And she would be running around me, but keeping her mouth shut. And I would go home and I'd be like, Mom, I can't find her. And then Amanda would come running into the back door and she'd be like, you need to stop messing with your brother. But I think those experiences really made me who I was, just because my family thankfully never treated me differently than the rest of my siblings, which meant that I was up climbing in trees and I was riding bikes and running behind cars and driving with my friend, because my dad would have my uncle over there with me, riding on the bikes and stuff like that. So I had a good childhood, but I also realized there's a lot of people that did not have that experience and they didn't get the opportunity to try things out, see if you boil the water for too long, if it's going to boil over and then you're going to have to clean up a mess, and try to work through those and troubleshoot the issues that they might run into. So after all that, what do you want to get out of the show, Colby?
I want camaraderie and just that sharing experiences, and whether those experiences are similar or completely different, um just that validity of vulnerability, if that makes sense. And like you said, just letting others know, you know, your experience is yours and can be yours alone, but you also, it might be, and probably is, more common than you might think. If you are, someone who has grown up without sight. And I say grown up without sight just because, that is our perspective. See what I did there?
It's like you're a professional or something.
I know.
It just flows, right? For what we're talking about, though, the title, I do like it. So we were going to go with a different title, and if you've paid any attention, you probably know what that title was. But I think our perspective just fits a lot better for what we want to get out of it.
It does, and I think it's more broad. You know, this is going to be about our lives and, past, present, and past and present, and, I will say future, but then that just gets me all tangled up. Um, but it really, yeah, and how that, can change and be shaped and influenced over time and with experiences. But also, there's certain things that, you know, will always kind of be those sort of steadfast roots for us. You talked about having, siblings and never being treated differently, than they were. And I'm also very blessed to say the same thing. I have a younger sister who is 3 years younger than I am. But I, too, am the only blind person in my family. And, growing up, my parents and my sister never treated me, any differently than, mom and dad never treated me any differently than my sister Kylie. And I'm so grateful for that now. And I don't know that I always saw that as a child. But I can definitely say, as an adult, I look back and I remember, thinking that, oh, your, parents push you, so much harder than, maybe some of my other blind friends, that I had growing up or who I went to elementary school with. But now I'm so glad, that they did because it definitely has shaped me into who I am today and has, been a positive influence, even though I didn't know, maybe didn't know it at the time.
So I don't know what the publishing cadence of this show will be, but we will be back. So I want you to hit that follow/subscribe button wherever you're hearing or consuming this. And if you're finding it somewhere else, because we have some interesting things in the works to help build awareness, then search for Our Perspective in your favorite podcast app. You'll find it by Colby and Michael. And once you've found that, hit that follow button or subscribe, because next time, and I just took a note, but next time we're going to talk about blind friends. And quick cliffhanger is I really didn't hang out with blind people as a kid. So I think there's a possibly different perspective there. And with that, do you have anything else you want to say before we wrap it up, Colby?
I am so excited that we are officially launching this endeavor.
Yes.
Excited to see, what it will turn into, how it will evolve, and become what it is supposed to be.
And we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time on Our Perspective.